Welcome back to another episode of Timebreaker podcast. I'm your host, Daniel.
And I'm Anthony.
And welcome to our first episode of 2022. Happy New Year, everybody. Hope you guys enjoyed your holiday break. We did. It was much needed, just to kind of refuel and regain and come back and reevaluate our situation here on Timebreaker podcast. But we are back. And going to be bringing you some brand new stuff, but with a little bit of changes. So, Anthony, you want to talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, so at the end of December, we released our top 10 video, and at the very end, we just did a very brief update. And I mean, we're going to keep this brief as well, but essentially, instead of going every week, it just kind of started to drain us. And so instead, we're swapping to 3 episodes a month, regardless of how long the month is. So, February's only got 4 weeks anyway, so you only see one reduction here. But like March, May, where you could see up to 5 a week, we're only going to be doing 3. And that's just a finite number that we're using only because, we did, I believe, from August through November straight, and it was just, it started to get to a lot.
Yeah, so this just gives us a little bit more of a wiggle room to kind of just, balance out, work-life stuff and just also continue to bring out the podcast. And it gets us a little bit more freedom to choose what we want the episodes to be about, what releases, or if we want to do different topics versus having to just come up with something every time. We struggled with that last year, but hopefully they're going to be a little bit more quality, a little bit more focus on this one. Kind of got screwed because, with this whole pandemic deal, we were going to talk about Morbius today, but that hasn't happened because Morbius is no longer released. It got postponed. So we got a couple different topics, but we got a good episode for you guys nonetheless.
Yeah, and on top of that, we had other weeks planned, and yet, we are less than a month into the year, and we've seen multiple movies already get delayed out of this year, which is kind of insane. And then on top of that, we had videos planned in preparation of other movies coming out, and so now those are getting scrapped or moved around because we were trying to at least be on top of a few of the videos to know a general idea of at least half the month's worth of content, and then coming up with one on the month itself. But now it's kind of a scramble again because these movies have just started moving around.
Yeah, so we just kind of have to roll with the punches and adjust things on the fly as these things are constantly moving around. But we're staying on top of it, coming out with different ideas to hopefully supplement those. And this year we also got some other ideas for just a content outside of just the podcast we want to throw out there here and there. So just be on the lookout for that. But without further ado, let's just jump right into today's episode. Kind of like a catch-up episode, talking about this past couple years with cinema, where it's at right now, and the state of movies in general, and a really hot topic of the filmmaking and the theater experience is, right, quite frankly, the theater experience right now. We got a lot of movies that are coming out in the theaters, but also some of them are kind of doing this whole video on demand at the same time. Some movies are just going straight to digital. Some movies are getting, we had that earlier Disney Plus premiere access, which was a disaster. And, other movies have gone, instead of doing the whole theatrical thing, we see Netflix picking up films like, Knives Out 2, and it's just going to be Netflix. So, we're with this whole pandemic situation and theaters kind of suffering. We've seen this whole revolutionary kind of change in the movies. And, some people would say that this was coming and it just accelerated the process. I don't know about that, but it's definitely changed how movies are coming out.
Yeah, I'm going to agree. It's not that cinema was on its way out, but we were already in the middle of a change. And then COVID hit, and it kind of just, it made things worse at first, for sure. We're kind of seeing a glimpse of what the new, schedule formula looks like nowadays. But yeah, I mean, I'm not going to say that cinema was perfect, because if you look at your highest grossing movies of the year, you only have a big handful, and you have another big handful on the opposite spectrum that made either just barely broke even or made negative profits. And so now we're kind of just seeing this hybrid approach where it's was this movie going to make money? If so, is it worth putting in theaters? If not, are we going to sell the rights? And it's just this whole jamble of things that now are happening with all these movies.
Yeah, and it's like really hard to like gauge the performance of these things. Like I feel like the box office is a really easy way to gauge performance. We get the box office numbers, we can see how much money the movie has made, and we know how much the movie costs to make, and it's really easy to gauge, is it worth it? But then when you throw on all these like streaming services and these digital platforms, it's hard to gauge because I don't know how much, a view counts, multiple views count. It's just hard to keep track of the data. And a lot of these streaming companies do keep that information under wraps. So it's really hard, where we could see like a movie like Dune, did okay at the box office, but I assume it did really well also on HBO Max. So we're getting Dune 2 or also, but then on the flip side, we can get like Mortal Kombat, which kind of bombed, but apparently we're getting another one. So it just kind of throws a wrench into how we perceive things moving forward. And I don't know how to like really what to make of it, like how to judge it.
Yeah, I mean, it's all kind of a jamble of what's going on. I mean, you have viewership data that they're looking at. You're now looking at your primary source, which it used to be box office, but now it's kind of just this mixed approach where like your first source of revenue for a film now isn't just its first box office numbers. It's now like, because movies are only in theaters for about 45 days now you're probably looking at that first 45 days where it's rental only for most studios. Not every studio has followed this yet, but most of them have, and so I imagine they're throwing that in. And then yeah, I mean, I really don't know what 10 million viewers is like data wise for Netflix or HBO or Apple, or there's just so many streaming services. And why there's a place and appreciation for these streaming services for people like me or Daniel who really like our physical media. That like streaming has become a very big downside of what we like to collect. Knowing I can never own it, like
The Mandalorian.
what used to be a small amount of content has now morphed into this giant pile of stuff we can't own. I know specifically for me, not being able to own The Mandalorian, not being able to own Zack Snyder's Army of the Dead. I mean, it's a bummer. Like, I really like both, and I'd love to have them in my collection, but because Disney and Netflix value their subscribers over having us still subscribe and yet give them extra money just to own a physical. I mean, it's super weird, and it's a real big disappointment. And it's why I don't even get excited when Netflix acquires something. When they announced Knives Out 2 was coming to Netflix, I was like, oh no, because like I didn't want to watch it on Netflix. And yeah, Netflix, has started to release their movies in theaters, but you pretty much have to catch them like the first week and then they're out.
Yeah, Netflix does like a really limited theatrical release where it's like almost like it's like, what do you even count that? Like how do you judge the success of like an Army of the Dead or like even like a Red Notice? I heard it was like one of their biggest movies, but like I don't know how successful it is. Like if you put it out in the theater, is it going to be a bonker hit? Like I don't know, and that's a weird thing, that we're not used to seeing. And like you too, like I was like I liked the first Knives Out, and I don't know if it's just me, like for physical media or just how I feel about streaming, where I'm just like, if it's only a streaming movie, I'm like just way less inclined to see it. I don't really know why, but it's just, I don't know. Like I feel like I do like that experience of like getting out, going to the theater and seeing something, even if that costs money, where I already have a Netflix account and like it's free for me to watch Knives Out too. But like, am I going to watch it like right when it drops out? I don't know.
I mean, it's just like, and then you have the opposite spectrum. Like, I have a fairly decent setup at home. Like, do I need a theater? Like, not like, if we were talking logistically, no. Like, my system is as good as I can get without spending extravagant amount of numbers of dollars. But like, I still prefer the movies. I can't get that IMAX experience. I can't get that Dolby Cinema experience. There's certain things that I just can't get in my home. And it's also just the fact that no matter how loud I crank my system, I ain't topping what the theater can do.
Right, and there's just also something magical about like the size of the screen and the immersive sound system, and then not only that, it's the communal experience. Like had Spider-Man come out on digital, that'd be so much lamer than seeing it in the theater with a crowd full of, I mean, you guys have heard all those crowd reactions and stuff. Like, it just adds another level to the movie for those kind of movies that just can't be matched at home.
Yeah, and so it kind of just brings us to this grand question of what is happening to cinemas, what is the future of it and what are we seeing right now? And for sure, right now we are seeing blockbusters. It is a blockbuster town at the cinema right now, and I personally don't think that's going to change for a while.
Yeah, and I mean, like, if we're being fair, like, that was kind of the direction and just the way things stood before the pandemic too, like, if you were just a little indie movie, like, you weren't really going to break even or make that much money. Granted, you were a lot cheaper, so I say the upside of streaming is that it kind of allows those indie small budget movies to still be made and just have a platform. But like, yeah, like box office wise, like, I feel like, and especially now, when people only have a limited amount of times they want to go out, or if they only got one movie they're going to see a month, it's going to be the blockbuster. Like, even at the beginning of the pandemic, we were worried, like, if blockbusters were even going to make it. Tenet came out. In a normal circumstances, Tenet could have probably made 400, maybe even 600,000 or 600,000 or 600 million. My bad.
Well, Tenet would have probably, and I'm going to stick to my guns here, but even with its mixed reception, I put quotes around that because I honestly don't think it's as bad as most people put it out to be. I still think it would have cleared over 500 million.
Yeah, no, like, it would have been good.
And I really don't like the fact that Tenet was seen as an absolute total financial disaster, and it was a disaster of forcing people to go back to the theaters, and it's just like, but if it had been put on streaming, it wouldn't even have made that much money. I mean, it's one of those things where it's like you had to force them to go back, because if you didn't, they're not going to. Like, yeah, when Dune came out, we were back to a point where people were ready to go back out, but like when Tenet came out, people were the absolute opposite. They were not willing to go out.
Yeah, Tenet was really the spearhead there, kind of leading the charge, and then we kind of saw a little spike for Wonder Woman, but Wonder Woman was not that good.
Actually, no. If we were talking about Wonder Woman actually, and I'm not. There's no good way to put this. It actually bombed, like, financially.
No, I know, but I mean like the interest of, like, if I was gonna go see a movie out there.
I did not see Wonder Woman in theaters. I will be straight up honest. I actually streamed that. I was already paying for HBO Max at the time, and so spending an extra $15, and this was during, one of the worst parts of the pandemic, and
yeah,
I just wasn't. Yeah, I just wasn't willing to go out there to watch it.
Yeah, and then so after Wonder Woman and kind of tanked, wasn't looking that good. We saw, kind of a lull, like, or movies in general kind of were like keeping it on the down low until probably like Godzilla.
Yeah, I'd say Godzilla. Yeah, it was a lot of smaller movies that were getting released during that time. Raya and the Last Dragon was a pretty big one, but because it day and dated,
right.
And not only that, Raya and the Last Dragon was actually banned from a handful of theaters because they were so mad at Disney for day and dating it that they just refused to show it, which I thought that was stupid because, no matter if it was going to be a small amount because of the Disney Plus thing, I mean, it was still revenue. And
yeah, I was prepared to see it in the theaters, but then it wasn't at our local theater chain.
Yeah, and it's just like, and this is where I haven't understood things. It's like, oh, we're going to boycott them because they releasing it day and date, but it's like, shouldn't you just take, yeah, it cut your figure in half, but at a time where, especially during that time when there was really no revenue coming in, like, you'd think they would have been more than happy to take it even with it being day and date. And they were doing it for HBO, so it was just them being mad because their biggest supplier, because Disney's been the highest grossing studio for the last couple of years, and so seeing their big runner, pulling their movies made them mad.
Yeah, Disney's a big draw, and like if you look at like the top 10 highest grossing movies, like a lot of them are Disney, and seeing them not commit 100%, especially with their premiere access, then there was a lot of movies I just kind of slept on because of it. It was just a turnoff for me because just at home, and I was like kind of on the fence with a lot of those movies, like Mulan, Onward, Soul, Black Widow at first until I could see that in the theaters. Like I just wasn't a fan of that, release schedule, especially when they were just I just waited, they would have been for free. So that approach was just weird for me.
Out of all the Disney movies that came out between probably March 2020 and when Black Widow came out, the only ones I thought were worth it. I did see Onward in theaters before the pandemic hit, and that was amazing. And then I went and saw Raya the Last Dragon in March. That was really good. And Cruella was surprisingly good. But like Black Widow for $30, kind of insulting, to be honest. I don't know. I wasn't a big fan of it. And I thought the $30 on Disney Plus was just too much.
Yeah, no, yeah, that was a very intimidating price point.
And for like a family of 5, family of 6, X, Y, and Z, everyone has their own way of justifying it. But, for someone like me, like it's cheaper for me to just go down to the theater and watch it than to pay $30 to own it on Disney Plus. And I think that was my bigger issue with it. It's like, if I were to buy it, I don't want to own it on Disney Plus. I'd rather own it on iTunes or Vudu or something. And so that whole thing I never did it.
Yeah, no, I never did the premiere access too. And, thank God that ended and, movies kind of started getting back into the swing of things. We saw a lot of blockbusters come out towards the tail end, latter half of last year. No Time to Die was really leading the charge there until, kind of Spider-Man kind of blew it out of the water.
Well, yeah, and so here's an interesting thing I want to talk about. Disney, actually, over the last... So we've had 3 Marvel movies, and we've had 1 Disney animated movie. And all 4... I'm like, there's no way to sugarcoat this. They didn't make money. And I don't think a lot of people are talking about this. I don't know what Disney's... Again, I'm not an executive at Disney, and I can't talk for what money they're making X, Y, and Z elsewhere to make up for this, but Black Widow, under $400 million. Shang-Chi, just above $400 million. Eternals, right above $400 million. Those are not... compared to what we were seeing pre-pandemic, they're not good numbers. And, people are going to argue with me and go, well... nothing's making pre-pandemic numbers. But Spider-Man just made $1.7 billion. So this has nothing to do with
that's
people
a pre-pandemic number.
Well, it's not that people aren't willing to go back. It's that if people know an option is coming, they're not going to pay extra to get it early anymore. Pretty much these people know it's going to Disney Plus because Disney announces the day these movies are coming out, when they're coming to Disney Plus, and so it's really creating no incentive to see it because it's like, oh, do I need to see it today or can I wait 30 days to watch it on Disney Plus? And they're kind of shooting themselves in the foot with this. And, there's this argument that, oh, well, these movies weren't that good anyway. But and Disney's new animated movie is literally blowing up on the iTunes store with the songs, and people are talking about it a ton, and everyone's now seen it. Where was this audience when it was in theaters? The movie practically bombed at the box office, and it's almost disrespectful at this point because if this were Frozen, everyone would have ran out to see it, but because it wasn't, it got like a huge hit at the box office. And like I went and saw it in theaters, and it was great, and I told people it was great, and then all of a sudden no one saw it because they were like, oh well, it's going to Disney Plus on Christmas Eve.
Yeah, it's like weird how we're seeing like a kind of like resurgence in like the home experience, supporting it. Like for instance, the Last Duel absolute box office bomb, but it's kind of got over like a little bit recently, like a little bit of cult following in the home video, physical media like world in a way. Like I remember that stuff was sold out for a while, and I couldn't get a Last Duel, and thankfully like word of mouth and stuff. It's a post like theatrical release, these movies are kind of getting more love than I feel like they would have before the pandemic. They kind of just would have, got lost in, the masses of all the movies. But I think there's something about like the way that the world is right now, and with this whole home experience that has given a little bit of light to some movies.
Statistically though, like the sad thing is that like, okay, we've all converted to being at home. I believe statistically the people who are still running like a TV speaker, it's like 70% of TV owners 70% or higher are only running like TV speakers. And it's like, without multi-channel audio, I mean, it's just a way that these directors and everyone working on these movies, they didn't envision you watching at home. Granted, if they made it on Netflix, they did, but like anywhere else, and this is where the bad thing has been with Pixar. Pixar has not had a theatrical release since Onward, because every single movie they've had, even the newest one, Turning Red, I believe is what it's called, also
it just
got pulled.
switched to Disney Plus.
Yeah, every single Pixar movie has gotten pulled. And, like, imagine you've been developing this movie for 4 years, and then you get pulled, and you're getting released only on Disney Plus. And it's got to be bringing morale down at Pixar, because this wasn't how you designed it.
Oh yeah, for sure. And I mean, like, it's not a huge hindrance on like the video, probably. But I know, like, I've seen like interviews with Hans Zimmer. Making the No Time to Die soundtrack is a lot different than making the Army of the Dead soundtrack, because of the channels and the home speaker system. And it's a definitely huge approach. And, if you're Pixar going into your process, like aiming for a theatrical release, and then you have to switch, like you get in the plug pulled, only Disney Plus, it's kind of a bummer. You got to kind of go back and like rechange your entire audio to kind of fit that. And I feel like Pixar is kind of getting shafted. Like, they used to be like the golden standard of animation. And now they're kind of being put on the back burner. Like, nobody really wants to go see your movies, and that's why you're only getting Disney Plus. Granted, I'm part of the problem. I haven't seen any of these latest Pixar movies. I didn't see Onward, Luca. What was the other one? I haven't seen any of them. So I'm part of the problem. But, fingers crossed Lightyear kind of sticks to its guns, because I'm actually looking forward to that movie, and I would actually go see it theatrically, and I really hope it doesn't get put on Disney Plus.
Yeah, and I think this kind of brings us to our next point of topic. It's that if you are an established brand, is the only real way you're getting a theatrical release right now. So hypothetically saying Lightyear gets a theatrical release this summer, what's the reason behind that? And it's not because, oh well, we're confident in it and it's a new IP. No, it is an existing IP that we know is popular, that they anticipate will do well, even with supposedly the big thing that's been going around is that families are not returning to the theaters. And so, but they obviously did for Spider-Man. And I think that's the whole point, is that now you cannot use the excuse that movies can't make pre-pandemic numbers. It's now been proven you can, regardless of restrictions, you can make or exceed that number. It's just a matter of pretty much having to take a Sony approach, and Sony does not announce when they're going to streaming. Sony does not own a streaming service, so your only way to watch said movie is to watch it in theaters, or to, again, wait it out for an undecided amount of time. And I think that's why Venom performed well. Venom actually did better than all the Marvel movies last year. Like, it kind of goes to show, like, Disney was the king of this, and now, yeah, Sony has less releases, but Disney's making less per film now. And I'm not saying that they're going anywhere, but I'm just saying it's a pretty sad way to be looking at things. And, even Disney Plus numbers, I mean, Disney stock is falling because they're not hitting the expectation. I think that's forcing them to now throw even more movies at Disney Plus, and I don't know, it's whack.
Yeah, and I mean, if you're a movie now, you can't just take for granted, like your brand or IP, like, oh, we're a Disney movie, we're going to make so much money, X amount of money. There was a time where, like, every live-action Disney release, we're like, oh, it's like guaranteed $1 billion, right? Not anymore. You look at, even MCU, that was almost used to be like guaranteed 500 mil, but not anymore.
It was even closer than it was higher than that. It was on
I'm
average, if you took out like Ant-Man the Wasp and Ant-Man, you were probably looking at like, I don't know, 700 to 800 million per film. Heck, and that's taking like the Avengers movies out. You add those in, you're looking at like a 1.2, $1.4 billion average.
Which is insane, but you're not getting that anymore.
And then if you slap Phase 4, what we have so far, even including Spider-Man, those other Marvel movies are really hurting it because those combined is 1.2, and then you have Spider-Man at 1.7, which gives you a total of 2.9, but you're dividing that between 4 films, and Spider-Man's the only reason that total looks even somewhat good. Yeah, you're still averaging around 700 million, but the fact that your other 3 movies grossed 400 is just, I don't know, it's not good. You know, and then now you have to look at smaller movies. So you got like House of Gucci, which actually did fairly decently at the box office, at least for what it is, what its budget is.
Right,
And
right.
then you have to look at the other Ridley Scott movie, The Last Duel. And this brings us to our next topic: is the fact that are superhero movies killing cinema? And I'll let Daniel start this.
Yeah, so this has been a really popular like topic of debate, in the last couple of years. Lots of directors come out, like Martin Scorsese, Denis Villeneuve, about like the quality of cinema or the quality of these films. Do they count as cinema? Are they, if I pull up my tie, are they film? Are they cinema? Like, do they fit those standards? And it's an interesting debate. It's an interesting thing to look at and see like how has it evolved, the art form, what it is, and I think I can see where they're coming from, that it's not cinema, it's not their cinema, it's not like that old type of Hollywood filmmaking. It's not like these quote unquote Oscar films, but there's something of their own, and you can't deny that they are literally carrying the movie industry on their shoulders. Like Spider-Man, maybe with no time to die, literally carried the box office this last year, and it's doing it into this year too. Like any of those movies, like I guarantee, like all of those directors, like filmography combined, don't even add up to a fraction of the revenue that the MCU has made. And you got to look at like the impact, what is it doing for the culture? What is it doing for these kids, inspiring them and giving them superheroes to look up to, and, creating these communal experiences. Some other directors have kind of come on board and be like, it's not like the kind of cinema that I anticipate or I have this idea of, but, it is doing something right. And it's getting us out there, and it's, keeping our industry funded, and, it's giving us something to look forward to, and, they're fun. They might not be the best movies, of course, like I don't think they're like top tier films. Like 9 out of 10 of them aren't, but they're still enjoyable. They're still solid. They're very consistently entertaining. And then it's fun to kind of, be surprised by like 1 out of 10 of those comic book movies that are like above the standard and kind of like blow me away.
Yeah, and I think just expanding on that, I think to become a pretty much the unprecedented superhero movie, to become to become the Dark Knight, you're not just creating a superhero movie, you are creating a movie. And I think a lot of people mistake this. It's that you're not going into this going, I'm making a superhero movie. No, like Christopher Nolan went into the Dark Knight saying, I'm going to create this really dark thriller,
Crime drama.
Yeah, crime drama that Batman is in and Joker is the enemy. And there's a big difference going to that approach. And then you have your Infinity Wars, your end games, where it's like, okay, we set up to this, now we're executing it, and we just need to create a plot A to B for both movies. And I think there's just a big difference, and I think it's why you can see a drastic change in quality between different Marvel movies. It's just their approach. While I think Infinity War and Endgame are excellent movies, they're great, they do their job well. I'm not going to sit here and say that, they're the best things I've ever seen in my life, because they're not. Especially Endgame. I think I prefer Infinity War over Endgame. And I think it's just because you can't sit down and watch Endgame without watching Infinity War, where I feel like you can do the counter. You can Infinity War as its own movie, really, I'm not going to say it completely stands alone. You still need that knowledge of the MCU, but it's not as far connected as Endgame is. If you just picked up Endgame, slapped in your player, man, would that be one confusing experience. But if you slapped Infinity War in and had borderline no knowledge of the MCU, it's going to be confusing, but I feel like it just stands on its own legs better as its own movie.
Yeah, it's like beginning to end more or less a Thanos movie, and it kind of fits. It's like it works as a Thanos movie. So yeah, it's on its own thing.
And so, but the directors who are saying these things, that superhero movies don't count as cinema and stuff like this, the best way to describe what they're making, they're not making a simple movie. They are aiming at an epic, is really the word I'm looking for. And correct me if I'm wrong, but The Last Duel, it wasn't made as a movie. It's really this epic about these warriors fighting, and he films it and creates it in this way that it's borderline a remnant of past cinema.
Yeah, and I think that's what they're holding on to.
And that's fine, but in order to allow something like that, you also need to allow current filmmakers to create the new cinema that people anticipate. And really what has happened to cinema, I feel, is we've switched from this movie idea first to this IP driven Game of Thrones like experience. So if you think of this, you took out the crowd reactions for the last six Marvel movies. So all the way back to Endgame. So if you take out okay, that doesn't even count. Okay, if you go pre-pandemic, you look at Thor Ragnarok, Avengers Infinity War, Avengers Endgame, and then you go and look at Spider-Man No Way Home. If you look at just those four movies, they're the being in the theater reaction, the being there opening night, you take that out, and where does your satisfaction with the movie go? Does it stay the same? And I'm going to go with no. And are you going to have as fond memories of watching it? I'm going to also go with no. So it's just this very different experience. But like if you go into a theater and you watch The Social Network, I feel like you're going to walk out being amazed with what that movie presented and what you walked away with.
No, 100%. Like what you're kind of getting out of these, and you're going for different things, and they are trying to do two different things. And it's weird because cinema is all encompassing. It's a culmination of every artwork. It's acting, it's set design, it's painting, it's script writing. It's all these things that come into one, and to put every movie ever into one category, it's really hard. And like even take like musicals. Musicals are so different than dramas, but are musicals cinema? No, they have songs, and nobody does that. Freaking La La Land was won so many awards, but that's so much different than a mob movie that Martin Scorsese would make. So it's just weird, and I mean I get what they're saying, but I mean if you look at even Martin Scorsese and look at one of his most profitable movies is one that I feel like is a little bit more current and hip and is The Wolf of Wall Street, and that kind of leans in more to modern take, and it's not as super classical as some of his other stuff. And you got to see some bit of a box office return there versus Silence. Well, I love both movies, but people want to see one versus the other.
Yeah, I think the other issue is that with these directors, so let's just talk about the Oscars. Okay, so we have all these different categories. There's best, drama, there's best animated movie. And, how many movies on average are animated? Let's take a guess at 4 or 5, right?
I'm actually very against the best animated picture category at the Oscars.
But that's the point, is that we're talking about what makes cinema, and it's okay, so you have this group of movies. You got about 4 or 5 animated movies a year. They get their own spot. And yet now we're trying to sit here and say that we need to throw a movie like Black Panther not into the best superhero movie, but the best picture out of every movie. And it's but we can't throw... So if, let's hypothetically say, Frozen was the best movie of the year, but it can't win best picture because it's animated.
No, well, the thing is it can.
Well, it can, but would it? And it probably won't, because it'll get thrown into the best animated. So why, with how big of an impact superhero movies have had, why is there just not a best superhero movie? Or, there could be a better way to describe it, but best comic book movie, best there is best adaptation, but best comic book movie. There's so many per year. And I think it's a disrespect to say that superhero movies aren't movies, because while yes, there are a handful that, really borderline aren't movies. But there's a big handful of them that are really, really, really good, and they compete with your best picture movie you can release. I mean, you have The Dark Knight, you have Logan, you just have these, yes, there are anomalies in the comic book movie genres, but they do exist. And having Logan get snubbed as a best adaptation and not a best film was kind of just like a slap in the face.
It was a slap in the face, but I feel like Logan, I mean, I feel more proud of Logan that it was actually able to take that nomination for Best Adapted Screenplay where no other comic book film has done it. And I feel like that was more groundbreaking, kind of a way to bridge that gap. While I did want it to be nominated for Best Picture or want Hugh Jackman or Patrick Stewart to get nominated because I thought their performances were amazing, it's at the same time it is disappointed that it didn't get more recognition, but I find more pride in the fact that it got what recognition it did. I'm in the camp where I don't want there to be another category for comic book movies, because then it's like, well, why isn't there a category for everything? We have Best Picture and we have Best Animated. And I already feel like Best Animated shouldn't even be a thing because Toy Story 3 got nominated for Best Picture because it was that good. So if your animated movie is that good, it will get recognized for the Best Picture.
See, I feel like, and this isn't to be insulting to people that, well, I mean, I'm going to be insulting to people that choose these things. They're really stupid. Okay, so here's the thing. We don't care. We really don't care about this stuff, but the fact that if a movie is nominated for Best Picture and blah, 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 they can get extra money and blah, 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 and more recognition, more people know about it, blah, 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 blah. Yeah, we can go on for hours about what getting a nomination actually does for you. There's a lot of financial success in it, but mostly, especially the last few years, a lot of people have just started toning out. But a lot of people are also trying to pretty much say movies that really have no business being a Best Picture, Best Actor, Best Actress.
Oh yeah,
should be there,
dude.
And a lot of people point at the fact that Heath Ledger won an Oscar post-death for The Dark Knight, and they say if any other actor dies, they should also get that. And I think they missed a point. The point wasn't he died, and that's why they gave it to him. Regardless if he was alive or dead, he was who it was going to. And so I felt like when Chadwick Boseman died and everyone said he needed to win an Oscar, but it wasn't even for a movie. I have not heard much about this movie, and I've briefly looked it over because I was looking to see why people were saying, and yet no one but, pretty much average people like me, you and I, are saying nominate him for an Oscar because he died. And I think it's a disrespect to him. He wouldn't want an Oscar just because he died. He would want an Oscar because he achieved an outstanding performance that beat everyone else. That was the best performance they've seen that year, not just because he sadly passed away. And I think, you start hitting this line of, Heath Ledger didn't win it because he died. He won it because he delivered an amazing performance. And I think it's just a disrespect to give an actor who's died a reward that they probably don't deserve. And it's not that they never deserved it. It's just the fact that if you give it to them and they didn't deserve it, I feel like you're always going to remember the fact they won an Oscar they didn't deserve.
Yeah, and we really do recognize movies that get wins that don't 100% deserve them. There's been a lot of Oscar snubs throughout the years. And the thing about too, and it just really frustrates me about, the comic book movie the fan base, they're so zealous and they're so passionate, but they're very tunnel vision. They stick in their lane, only watch comic book movies, only diehard comic book movie fans. And I think they really get the mixed message where they see Heath Ledger win an Oscar nom for playing, or win an Oscar for playing in a comic book movie. So they automatically think every quote unquote great performance in a comic book movie needs to be at that level or needs recognition. But dude, have you watched The Dark Knight? Do you know how good of a performance he is? And I'm sorry, I love Andrew Garfield. No, you don't. There's no way that Andrew Garfield is better in Spider-Man, any of the Spider-Man, than he is in Social Network. No way. Chadwick Boseman, I love him as an actor. Not worthy of Black Panther. There's just certain performances that people champion and people, really are like, oh my God, like this is so good. But it's like, it's not that level. Like you have to really step back and look at some of these Oscar movies, look at some of these movies that require a lot and be like, is it that level? Like, is it Leo in the Revenant level? Is it,
and I feel like The Revenant, though, is an example of just it's more of a what the hell moment, because if you watch all the other things Leo's done, and that, out of all the movies, that was the one. He had so many other great movies he was in, and it's kind of just disappointing that was the one that they finally said, oh, okay, you did well enough. Or I guess the rest of the people this year didn't do better than you. And it's just like, there's just, I don't know. I've seen a lot of his other movies, and some of them are really good. Just look at his performance in The Wolf of Wall Street. That's crazy.
Oh, yeah, I totally agree. But even then, like, are these people in the comic book movies doing even a Revenant level job? I don't think so.
I think they're far and few between.
Right, like there's only a very few that I think would have got a nomination. Hugh Jackman, Logan, Patrick Stewart, Logan, and not a whole lot else, if I'm being honest with you. Even there was a huge talk. Remember when Endgame came out? Like Robert Downey for Iron Man and Endgame. Dude? Come on, really?
I think there's a difference between the actor stepped into the role and he is the role, and X, Y, and Z. Then
you're transforming for the role,
right? And it's more of that Robert Downey Jr. just pulled off Tony Stark. I'm not saying he's not a good actor. He's an excellent actor. He did a really good job as Iron Man. But when you look at what the Academy, I'm sorry, I make fun of the Academy a lot because I think they do some really stupid stuff. But like, if you actually go and look though at what performances they typically choose, someone like Robert Downey Jr., someone like Hugh Jackman and Logan, they don't hit that criteria that they're looking for.
Right. And like, you just got to step back. Like, if you're a comic book fan and like a scene made you cry, or you look at Tom Holland, when spoilers, it's been out, you've seen it, it's at 1.7 billion. You look at Tom Holland when Aunt May died and you see him crying and choking up, and when he's looking at the screen, you're like, oh my gosh, look at this performance. But like, okay, dude, you have low standards. Like, he's great, but like, have you looked at some of these other performances in other movies?
Yeah, and I've been seeing a lot of talk, Spider-Man No Way Home should be nominated for an Oscar. Okay, so I think the last subject we're going to talk about here is just, I think, I want to put this as lightly as possible, but I think a lot of people are too nostalgic driven to understand the difference between a nostalgic film that touches on things from your past, and so they create this very good feeling when you see them, in an actual movie that is like above the lines. There is no nostalgia when you watch The Dark Knight. Now there is, but when you first saw it, this was just a grand epic adventure.
And that didn't
Everyone
even win Best
went
Picture.
into No Way Home knowing that this was going to be a nostalgic driven adventure already from the trailers. You knew what you were going into, and so walking out going, oh my gosh, that was amazing. Okay, spoiler warning, but like, No Way Home is not the best movie ever, and it's got problems.
Yeah, like, even with the nostalgia, I will even include that in my Oscar, nomination goggles. It's still not better than The Dark Knight, and the Dark Knight didn't even get nominated, or didn't even win. I don't know if it might have got nominated. It didn't even win. So like, dude, that's like the tentpole best comic book movie film out there. So like, the only cut slack I will give Spider-Man is that the Oscars also, in my opinion, should be about culture and how filmmaking reflects our current day. And the only credit I will give Spider-Man is it kind of revived cinema today. That's the only reason I would ever even consider it getting a nomination. But that's even cutting it slim, because it's just not that level of a film for me to do that.
Yeah, and this is coming from two people who have seen it. So I've seen it, I think I've seen it 6 times. And I know Daniel's seen it at least 3.
3? I'm at 3.
And
we both love the movie. Don't get us wrong.
Yeah, we really like it. And, and don't get me wrong. Once the Spider-Man show up, like, the movie is captivating. Like, it finishes so quick because I'm just so engaged with what's going on. But, like, a lot of people forget this, is that first section of the movie is pretty rough. Like, you have him getting caught, and that whole scene, is a whim. But the whole college thing, it's dragged. It is super dragged out. And two, it's not very entertaining. It takes a while to get through. And, it's just one of those things. The more times you see something, the more you start to see things that catch your eye. And yeah, after seeing it 7 times, I still really love when the Spider-Man show up. And I think the movie from then till it ends is absolutely phenomenal. But there's a lot of problems going up to that scene.
Yeah, and I mean, you just got to take a step back and kind of like compare it and like think about it, like compared to these other films, like Ford v Ferrari, Jojo Rabbit, Arrival, Hacksaw Ridge, Mad Max Fury Road, The Revenant, American Sniper. Like, is it Whiplash? Like, it doesn't come close to those kind of movies because just on like a story making, on a filmmaking level, like those movies just blow these kind of films out of the water. Just in terms of how they're made, in terms of performances, in terms of script. Like, I just hate to be that guy, but like I feel like comic book movie fans need to like get out and like expand their movie palette. Like come on.
Well, I think the best way to look at this, and a lot of people are like, well, maybe it's because it's a sequel is why we're bashing on this. It's like, it's not the case. There's been sequels that have won Oscars. Look at Toy Story 3. But when you are a sequel, you have this added pressure that you can't just be... Granted, back in 2010, the word nostalgic driven was not a... It really wasn't as big of a concept as it is now. Star Wars The Force Awakens was a really big push in that this is a very nostalgic driven movie. But in 2010, that wasn't the case. But look at Toy Story 3 as a movie. What does it expand on? Does it expand on anything? Well, it's not even just its themes, but like... Is it just your conventional sequel, or does it expand on Toy Story 2 and create this brand new story with different themes from the second one? Because the themes of the second and the third one are very different from each other. And the fourth one has different themes from the third one. And, it's just, yeah, I mean, if you think that No Way Home deserves an Oscar, I would encourage you... Well, I would just encourage you to branch out, and especially if you think No Way Home deserves an Oscar, you've never seen The Dark Knight. I would highly recommend that one. I mean, if you're looking at A-tier superhero movies, the Dark Knight trilogy is probably the best example we have.
Wait, bring that back one more time.
If you're looking at what word did I use?
If you're looking at A-tier what?
If you're looking at A-tier, like, superhero movie trilogy.
Oh, okay, superhero movie trilogies. Okay, I was
What did I say?
No, I hope you said that, because if it's trilogies in general, I'd been like, dude, there are better Oscar trilogies.
Oh, yeah, I know. Trilogy? Yeah. No, I was meaning superhero trilogy.
Yeah, but, like, I mean, like, if you want to look at sequels, like, you're going up against the king of all Oscar films. And that is The Return of the King. And No Way Home doesn't even come close, my guy.
I'll be honest. I can sit here and honestly tell you, I've seen Return to King once, I've seen The Two Towers once, and I've seen Fellowship of the Ring once.
And I will sit here and tell you that Lord of the Rings, The Return of the King is the greatest cinematic achievement ever.
I believe you, but I didn't watch
11 for 11, dude? No movie does that.
I'm just going to sit here and say I did not sit through in one sitting.
That's fair.
I used that 2 disc on the extended edition, and the moment disc 1 was over, I'm like, all right.
That's what it's there for, dude. But yeah, so just going back, like, there's so many good movies out there, like, and a lot of these great great Oscar movies are one-offs. They're just small single movies. Granted, The Departed is not a small movie; it's 2.5 hours long, but it's 2.5 hours of glory. You should watch it.
God, that movie is so... We had so many jokes about that. We joked about that movie for like 3 or 4 months. That was
and it won
joke.
Best Picture. So, like, it's good. And there's so many good movies. And they got these huge stars. Hell, half of the people in Star Wars and in MCU are these award-winning actors that are coming into the MCU just to have some fun. But they got the chops because they've been in some of these great films of all time. So it's definitely worth your while to like expand and branch out and see what's out there. And then you come back and be like, I think in a way you'll even appreciate comic book movies even more for what they are, because you know, like, they're not like these high class cinema, but they are like these fun amusement park rides. I think they've said that, in reference to that are really good and just a good time, that you don't have to like be super plugged in, because for a lot of these other movies, they are an emotional roller coaster. And not saying that comic book movies aren't, but like, have you watched Marriage Story, dude? Jesus.
I watched it to watch them scream at each other. When I watched Kylo Ren yell at Black Widow for a nice solid 10 minutes.
But that was intense 10 minutes, dude.
The fact it was 10 minutes was insane. I did not think that was going to be a 10-minute scene.
It's heavy, but like, and you don't see comic book movies really get that heavy. But so it's refreshing to see.
Yeah, and I always feel like people watch our channel and feel like we're very negative people. We're not. We're very honest about, like,
we say it how it is.
Yeah, it's just, if you're looking at Black Widow, or sorry, not Black. Well, I would really hope you're not. But if you're looking at like Black Panther, No Way Home, Avengers Endgame as Oscar winners, I think you just kind of need to take a step back and re-examine why you're saying that. And if it's nostalgia, that's probably why it shouldn't be there.
But even Black Panther doesn't have nostalgia.
You're right. That is the one of that bunch that is not nostalgia. That one alone.
That was a cultural take. That was like a cultural moment. That's why that got.
It was a cultural moment.
Which I respect.
And I respect that movie. I respect that movie so much for the fact I cannot believe that movie was over when it was. I was like, holy Christ, it's been 2 hours.
And I do give credit for the Oscars, like I said before, for doing that. Like, there was a time where the Best Picture winners were some of the huge movies that, everybody was talking about and everybody was going to see at the box office. You look at, I haven't seen it, but you look at Gladiator, you look at Titanic, you look at the Lord of the Rings movies. These were movies everybody was going to go see and everybody was talking about that were also high-class cinema. Not everybody has seen The Shape of Water, even though I love The Shape of Water, but, we kind of changed, but this is how it is.
I think there's this trend with Best Picture movies. They're very mature movies, and there's no way to really sugarcoat that. There's not a lot of them that aren't like that. A big chunk of them are just very
it's a very
heavy.
Small fraction that are not rated R too.
Yeah, they're typically like Shape of Water. It's hard to, unless the person is mature enough to handle it. There's a lot of nudity in that one specifically, and there's a lot of mature themes, lots of blood and gore. I mean, there's just so much where it's like, unless that person is okay with that stuff, it's hard to recommend. The Revenant, lots of blood and gore. Gladiator, lots of blood and gore. Like, all of these. But movies.
I still can take a step back, and I still think The Shape of Water is an absolutely beautiful movie, and I support it winning Best Pictures, like 100%.
And it's beautifully shot.
Yeah, Guillermo del Toro is awesome, dude.
I still want to see Nightmare Alley.
Pacific Rim, dude? Hell yeah. So, yeah, like, I just, this cinema is changing. It is ever going to be changing, who knows? Maybe in 50 years we're going to get VR movies, and we'll be in the movies. I don't know. But, it is changing. We got this at-home streaming service deal going on right now, which is a cool option. Some people aren't in a position. I know my dad was sick during Shang-Chi, and so him being able to see it on Disney Plus was cool because he wasn't able to see it when it came out during the theatrical release. So there is some positives to it, and especially with what's going on, it's a cool option to have, but it is just something food for thought to think about, like where it's going.
Yeah, I wholeheartedly agree, and I'm really hoping that the movie schedule doesn't continue to shake up like this. I hope that we start to see movies. I thought we were done with these delays, and it really is a bummer we're still seeing this happen. I really wish there was. I mean, I know that things started shuffling when the pandemic hit, and I really wish they'd instead of just delaying to a random date, I really wish they had taken a step back, really examined the release date, looked at their other releases, and like made this finite decision that, okay, this is a reasonable amount of time after X release. And I think that's what happened with Morbius, is just it was stupid close to begin with. Like, I remember we were sitting there like, are they really going to release it less than 90 days after Spider-Man? I mean, it was crazy fast. And then, April 1st.
Yep. So, yeah, it's just crazy to keep track. Hopefully it stays the same. James Cameron, Please stick to your guns, my guy. I cannot take another delay.
I'm not getting my hopes up until I see that trailer, dude, because at this rate, that movie is fictional. It's all made up.
Dude, even at this rate, you can see a trailer, you can see a poster, and they can still pull that.
That's true. But right now, I barely even believe Avatar 2 actually exists because it has been in production so long that it's hard to fathom.
It exists, dude. You gotta have faith. I have faith. I'm like the one guy that has faith, but I have faith. Yeah, that's gonna do it for us. Hope you guys enjoyed our time back. We will see you next week with a brand new topic. We'll catch you then.
See ya.
Thanks for listening to this week's episode of Timebreaker Podcast.
If you did enjoy it, please be sure to drop a like and subscribe and make sure to ring that notification bell for new episodes every Wednesday.
See you next week.